Welcome to Doing Business in Africa. I'm Sue Bierkes and we're here in the warm heart of Africa, Malawi, a country that's literally come from rags to riches in just a few short years, and we're going to find out what it's like doing business here. Coming up in the show, how Malawi has evolved from a famine-stricken nation to a net food exporter, how the country is trying to diversify from its key cash crop, tobacco. What treasures lie below the surface, the race for Malawi's resources, and why a uranium mine could help solve the country's foreign exchange problems. Telecoms in Malawi, what's driving growth in this sector? Why some of Africa's biggest banks are moving into Malawi. And how some local entrepreneurs are making it big despite facing some unusual challenges. Five years ago, Malawi was one of the 10 poorest countries in the world. And when President Bingu wa Mutharika stepped into office, the country's economy was literally in tatters. It faced one of the worst food security situations in the world. There was no money in government coffers, and the country's infrastructure was in a state. The first step on the president's to-do list was to rekindle relationships with the donor community, and then ignore critics and implement an agricultural subsidy program which would inevitably drive an average GDP growth rate of 7.5% for the next 5 years.
I knew we were right. If you look at the smallholder farmers here, using a hoe, I mean a poor woman with a baby on her back, struggling the whole day, and she cannot afford to buy improved seeds. She cannot afford to buy fertilizers. In fact, she cannot even afford to buy small improved agricultural implements other than a hoe. And then you come and say, that woman does not need subsidy. Then you take the farmers in Europe and North America with modern tractors, computerized, with music, some of them I understand even air condition. You say they need subsidy, and this woman doesn't. And I said, no, you're not serious. So I said, with or without your support, I'll go ahead and do it anyway. But I had, if you like, what might be an exit point. I said, look, if within 3 years I'm not able to feed my people with that subsidy program, then come and you can criticize me, we discuss. But as it turned out, within 12 months, within a year, we turned things around.
Malawi expects to produce 36% more maize this year, creating a surplus of 1.3 million tons. So while its food supplies are secure, the country is over-reliant on tobacco for more than 70% of its foreign exchange earnings.
Agriculture alone employs more than 80% of the whole Malawian population. And out of that 80%, we're talking of something like 32% of the population is now involved in production of tobacco. And out of that 32%, 90% is small-scale farmers, the rest being large estates.
The tobacco industry remains tainted by mistrust between farmers, buyers and government over market prices for the crop. To try curb exploitation of farmers, government introduced a reserve price, but buyers say that a drop in demand for Malawi's burley tobacco is forcing prices down. This puts the industry regulator, the Tobacco Control Commission, between a rock and a hard place.
The auctioneer will always have a reserve price, and that's what we've done to make sure that once the auction for tobacco starts, the starting price should be what the farmer needs to get with his 15% margin. So really, this year the prices have been slightly lower on the pretext that the buying community have perceived an oversupply situation, especially with barley. But we're surprised that that oversupply situation doesn't apply to the Virginia flu, and yet they're also paying lower prices than last year.
Top of the agenda is trying to manage the interests of all the parties involved, while not deterring foreign investment.
We're working towards what one would call a win-win situation, where both parties in the whole matrix are at least happy. It doesn't normally happen that way. As I said, most businesses will try and capitalize on making sure that the raw materials they're getting as cheap as possible, so that they increase their margin at the end of the day. But when that gets beyond just increasing and sustaining their profitability, then it hedges on exploitation.
It's this dependence on an all too often complex tobacco market that's one of the driving forces behind government's agricultural diversification strategy. Cotton, tea and sugar have been highlighted as key areas of development. Africa's biggest sugar producer, Ilovo, has been in Malawi for some 12 years and generates 45% of the group's operating profit from here. It's also the country's biggest taxpayer.
Sugar fluctuates with tea as Malawi's second major cash crop earner. And with a new duty-free, quota-free agreement with the EU coming to fruition this year, this industry is expected to grow even more.
We export 1/3 of our production. 2/3 we sell locally in the domestic market. We've got a very good distribution system throughout Malawi, and where we also subsidize, as a company, we subsidize the transport cost to all our depots throughout the country, which obviously helps keeping the local sugar price down. Malawi being one of the least developed countries in the world, we're part of the EBA, Everything But Arms arrangement, which will give us duty-free and quota-free access from the 1st of October 2009, which obviously for us creates a huge opportunity to expand and to export our sugar into the EU.
90% of Malawians are subsistence farmers, and every multinational operating in the agricultural space has to work with local farmers to be successful.
We're looking at quite a lot of expansion on the grower side. Between the two estates, around 600 growers, and they supply us with about 10% of the total sugar cane.
One of the biggest challenges companies like Ilovo face in Malawi is access to sufficient forex. The tobacco industry generates the bulk of the country's foreign exchange earnings, but this is seasonal. So if prices are low or the season is slow, all sectors of the economy suffer.
Our major challenge is basically to just control your forex, foreign exchange earnings. The supply of electricity is also under the spotlight at the moment. A lot of companies are under pressure due to unstable electricity supply.
One thing Malawi is not short of is water. The country is home to Africa's third largest mass of water, Lake Malawi, and this is where government is laying its hopes of power generation.
Government already has identified projects, focusing mostly on hydropower, because as I said, we have lots of water in Malawi. So we do have projects on stream to address the shortages that we have. One of the key challenges we have also is transportation. You know, for many years, our products have not been as competitive on the international market because of transportation. So we hope, and we are counting on the fact that once the rail routes through Beira, through Nakala, and especially the Shire-Zambezi linkage is on stream, that we will cut down the cost of transportation and our commodities will become more competitive.
Around $500 million worth of new projects is expected to come online by the end of this year. And much of this investment is in agriculture and agro-processing. And it's here where Malawi's newly formed relationship with China is expected to play a major part. After 42 years, the country cut diplomatic ties with Taiwan in favor of the Asian giant.
The Chinese have invested in cotton industry. We are hoping that they'll invest even more, because we would like cotton to be the second best crop after tobacco. So we're working on that. We have an integrated cotton strategy, and we would like sooner rather than later to export yarn, not to export raw materials. We are also discussing various other areas like cement making, because we do not manufacture enough cement in Malawi, and yet we have a lot of deposits. So we have a project that we're hoping the Chinese will invest very shortly in cement.
Malawi's nascent mining industry is one area where it might be able to alleviate pressure on its forex reserves. The uranium mine in Karongo in the north is the country's first foray in this sector. The Kayelekera mine is majority owned by the Australian-based Paladin Energy, while government has a 15% stake. The mine is expected to run at full capacity by the end of this year, producing 3.3 million pounds of uranium. The IMF says exports from this mine could contribute to around 10% of the country's GDP.
This will definitely give the country a lot of income, and there will be a lot of monies coming in. And apart from that, we have got another new uranium company called Global Metals. This is another Australian company which is prospecting uranium in Kasungu area and Livingstone area in the north.
After years of underdevelopment and autocratic rule, Malawi's new democracy means it's finally starting to exploit its mineral resources, which is why it's conducting its first geological survey.
We are ready to find anything. Of course, I would love to have diamonds. Gold, I think we know we have. We have gold, we have bauxite, we have heavy mineral sands, we have uranium in different places. We have also limestone. I think we've already started exploiting to make cement. We have emerald, but maybe not on a commercial basis. So we would like to have this geological map and have people come seriously to invest in exploration. And who knows, maybe there's some oil down there. And if we find it, well and good.
After the break, why African banks are seeing potential in Malawi, what's driving growth in the telecom sector, and why one person's greatest fear might just be another's success story. Malawi officially became a democracy in 1994.
People are free.
But it was only 10 years on when it really started firmly on its path of recovery. And part of that process was developing a sustainable financial sector.
We are coming from a situation whereby we had a very few banks in Malawi. Within a short period, 2 more banks joined in. And within the past 5 years, and today, we are now talking of 11 commercial banks and 2 discount houses. You're also looking at the number of bankable people, the people that currently hold bank accounts. I think it has grown to a mere 10% to about 20% now of the entire population.
A liberalised economy, renewed donor interest, debt cancellation and a stable political environment are all contributing to the growth in the financial sector here in Malawi. And this in turn is seeing increased investment by other African banks. 3 new banks have entered the banking sector over the last few months: Intercontinental Commercial Bank, First Discount House and EcoBank. As part of its aggressive expansion plans, EcoBank, which is Africa's largest bank by geographic spread, moved from its West African base to East Africa and Rwanda and now Southern Africa in Malawi.
We acquired Loiter Bank with 2 branches. At the moment, we'll say we're small. We are ranked number 9 among 11 banks in the country, but our goal is to be among the top 3 banks.
But acquisitions in a developing economy require some adjustments to the day-to-day running of the business.
The bank we acquired is essentially a wholesale bank, and our focus is to be a retail bank. So we first need to change that mindset, to get the people to look at it as we are serving customers. So the major challenge has been human resources management, but this we are getting over with. The second challenge has been on the issue of forex as well, because there is a lot of dependence on importation, and the country does not generate so much foreign exchange.
And Malawi could play a major role in kickstarting the new alliance between South Africa's Nedbank and EcoBank.
Incidentally, it's only in Malawi that you have EcoBank and Nedbank operating together. In every other country, you find EcoBank and you don't find Nedbank, or you find Nedbank and you don't find EcoBank.
The growth of the banking sector runs alongside the development of the Malawi Stock Exchange. During the liberalization of the economy, privatized government organizations were the major listings on the bourse, and from around 2005, there was a lot of interest from foreign investors looking for exposure in Africa. But all that changed last year when investors pulled out due to the global financial crisis.
There was actually a heightened awareness of the existence of the market, roughly from about 2004 on the part of investors. That's actually when you started seeing quite a bit of interest from the retail, small-scale investor, the domestic investor coming through into the market. Whereas before then, of course, it was actually quite very much the international investor that was quite a big influence in this market. Towards the end of 2008, we also actually witnessed now the sort of withdrawal of actually the international investor. Over the last 2 months or so, we've actually seen the international investors slowly coming back into this market as well. And we're actually just hopeful that things will actually pick up from that point on.
There are also plans in the pipeline to automate the bourse.
In the next 12 months, we should actually be up and running with an electronic central depository system, moving away from the current paper-based system, that's the manual system. Then we're actually looking at into the second half of 2010, moving on into 2011, also actually doing the front end.
Last year, in the midst of a global financial crisis, the Malawi Stock Exchange saw the listing of telecoms company TNM.
We jokingly said that we would make it to the Guinness Book of Records, being the only company to get listed in a depression. But I think Malawi has also, I mean, a bit of a closed economy. Also, the stock exchange here is still developing, and being in the process, we never got negative signals that really forced us to come back on the decision. So we went ahead, and it was quite successful. I think we listed for a price of 2 kwacha. It went up a bit, but came down, and it's quite stable.
Like other African markets, growth in this sector is centered around demand by low-end consumers. More than half of Malawi's population is under the age of 18, and only around 2.5 million people have cell phones, providing the perfect combination for value addition mobile phone technology. And this is key to TNM's growth strategy.
What you see in more maturing markets, although this is not a real mature market, is that you see that a lot of the revenues are coming from, or a growing part of the revenues are coming from value-adding services. And we see that also. We were the first one to introduce ring-back tones, which is highly successful, with also for me an incredible big amount of users. Then we're talking about 100,000 users already.
Rapid economic growth in Malawi's newfound democracy has allowed the right climate for local entrepreneurs to flourish. Mike Chilewe is the Mike in Mike's Trading, a welding company that's grown from a startup using borrowed equipment to supplying products to major corporates like TNM, Zain and Toyota.
We are coming from a culture where most of the companies were owned by foreigners, like the direct investors, the foreign direct investors. So it's just now when we've learned and realized that we're late as Malawi indigenous people. For fellow Malawians to accept you, it was very difficult because they were used to the foreigners. But now we can see an acceptance. Because of that acceptance, Mike's Trading is now trying to change into other products because we can see the opportunities. So we are really growing with the economy.
And while Mike's Trading in Blantyre, Malawi might seem about as far from Wall Street as humanly possible, the effects of the credit crisis are just as strong.
Because of the credit crunch happening in the US, it has also affected us here because the banks are very, very careful in the way they want to give out money. I would give you an example where we want to put up we want to diversify into the hotel industry. But it's difficult for us because the banks are very rigid. They cannot just give out the money anyhow because you have a lucrative project that you want to pursue. So that is also bringing in a restrictive growth for us, because for them to give you, it's not just about the collaterals, because the Americans failed despite the collaterals presented to the banks. So they're very cautious.
But for some industries, surviving through the tough times isn't really much of a concern when you can literally live for a year without eating anything. Some might call it the call of the wild. Reg Carvalho calls it the call of the crocodile. After years of running a successful property development company in Lilongwe, Reg, who has a passion for the outdoors, decided to go into the next logical venture, crocodile farming. But he says crocs have got a bad name, and changing perceptions has been one of the biggest challenges.
You know, as you know, throughout Africa or throughout the world, there's a major conflict between humans and crocodiles. And it is still quite difficult getting the people used to the idea, that they will be of some value in the near future.
The recession has eaten into the demand for croc skins, which are used in high-end retail products like handbags and watch straps. Nyika Farm has seen a drop in sales of around 60 to 70%. But like French luxury goods group Hermes, who've started breeding its own crocs on farms in Australia to meet demand for its leather bags, Rich is optimistic that business will pick up.
There is a fairly big demand for crocodile skins. Well, with the recession at the moment, things have slowed down, but I think it isn't the first time that it's happened. About 15 to 20 years ago, there was a similar recession, but I think it's only going to last for a year or a year and a half, and then I think things will come back to normal.
Perhaps some other companies could learn a thing or two about resilience and survival from these creatures. Over the past 5 years, Malawi has had to make some tough decisions about its future and has just started seeing the rewards of its efforts. The number of Malawians living below the poverty line has dropped by 12%, and government is confident it will achieve the UN's Millennium Development Goals. But President Mutharika firmly believes that the focus must stay on developing the country's rural areas.
You must feed your nation first before you can start thinking. Secondly, I think we have to find programs that relate to the ordinary people. We have over 70% or so of our people living in rural areas. That is why one of the priority areas that I've said is what I call integrated rural development programs. The aim of that is to take development to the rural communities rather than ask the rural communities come to the urban centers to look for development. We want to have good roads, we want to have good hospitals, centers where you have good tarmac roads, electricity, piped water, a shopping, trading center in various rural areas. This will bring the development of those rural areas and fighting poverty. So I would say that fighting poverty is really the priority number one, and we are doing well in this one. Again, we are within target vis-a-vis the UN Millennium Development Goals of halving poverty by a certain time. I think by 2015 we will meet that target.
Malawi's fast economic growth rate means that its leaders are making the right choices and businesses are thriving, meaning that the world is starting to pay attention to this warm heart of Africa.
Next time on Doing Business in Africa. It may be better known as a popular tourist destination, but Mozambique has attracted a flood of foreign direct investment since the end of a devastating civil war. While most of this has been centered on a few mega projects, there are plentiful opportunities on the ground. So who's making money in this Southern African paradise and how are they doing it? Find out next time on Doing Business in Mozambique.